it's Whitney. Welcome to another episode of the Healthy Balanced Vegan Body series, where I explore a new book every Wednesday and the different opinions and methodologies, research all around how to achieve the optimal weight, the optimal health for your body through a plant-based diet. Today's video is all about 80-10-10. This is a book that has so much hype, so many different opinions on it. I am really looking forward to exploring it, and to be upfront, I think I'm going to split this video into a two-part series, one now for this video and one further in the future when I have more chance to experiment with it again. This is actually the second time that I've read this book, and so I want to share with you today some of my own opinions and feelings and experiences around it, what it was like to reread it, and what I'm anticipating in terms of trying this diet again in the future. So, number one, why wouldn't I try it right now, or why didn't I? To be completely honest, that I still have emotional frustrations or skepticism when it comes to this book, and that's something that I want to start this video off with first, to really just get my own personal feelings out of the way before I share with you some quotes from this book. I feel like, I don't know, there's so much hype around 80-10-10. It seems to be a very trendy thing, especially on YouTube and social media, especially with, it seems like, teenagers or people in their early 20s. It seems to be like this magical solution to being your healthiest, to getting in great shape. There's so much hype around this in terms of losing weight and looking great. And I feel like there's also a lot of negative energy and pressure around it. Am I the only one who feels that way? So I think that's a huge part of the reason that I feel resistant to this book or this way of eating. This is the low-fat, raw vegan diet is really a great way to summarize it. And I will be getting into lots of details if you've never heard of 80-10-10 before or barely know anything about it. And speaking of which, if you don't have time to watch this whole video, down below in the YouTube description field, there's a link to where you can sign up to get my PDF notes, which will be much more in depth than what I'm going to cover in this video. And you can easily skim it, whatever you prefer, video, reading the notes, or both, whatever works for you. I want to provide as many resources as possible. I'll also link to where you can buy this book if you feel convinced that you want to read it yourself and try it out. So here are a few things that have prevented me from really going forward into 80-10-10. Number one, I should share with you that I did try 80-10-10 back in I think around May or June 2012. I had heard so much about this book. I got this book from the publisher, I think, to review, and I really wanted to try it because so many people were talking about it. I did the diet for a month to 2 months in San Francisco, and I really enjoyed it. There's some really great recipes in here. I love how simple they are. They're super easy to make. Some require zero preparation. Some are just blending something together or chopping things up and tossing them in the bowl, so that's great. It doesn't take a ton of time. A lot of the foods in here are things that you can find at pretty much any grocery store, but it also really helps if you live in a city like San Francisco, Los Angeles, where you have abundance of fresh fruit, organic fruit. So I felt really lucky to be living there when I decided to try this out, because I went to my favorite grocery store called Rainbow Grocery, and it is all organic. Their produce is all organic, and so I just go there and load up on all these different types of fruits. And what I really liked was trying so many different types of fruits. I hadn't really put that much emphasis on fruit before, but now I was trying all different types of apples and berries and things like persimmons and figs, and I just felt like this whole world opened up to me. And that was really thrilling. I loved how simple it was, like I mentioned, how easy it was to prepare foods, and I liked how I just felt like my body was digesting things more easily, and how I could just have a huge watermelon for lunch and feel satisfied. So to me, that was really exciting. I felt like I had more energy, I felt a little bit more vibrant, but I also felt like I was being pretty strict. I remember going to restaurants and thoroughly reading through the menus, trying to figure out what I was going to eat and how much fat I could eat, and would I be counting the nuts, and if I eat this much fat right now, I can't eat any more fat for a few more days. So to me, it got a little dangerous for someone that has a history with an eating disorder, and so that strictness is something that I personally need to be very careful with. I've experienced very similar things with doing oil-free, but that's another topic. I feel like it at times felt really abundant, and at times it felt limiting and a little too strict for me. And I think that's a major part of my personal concerns with 80-10-10. Now, why did I stop doing 80-10-10? It was really kind of bad timing. About a month or two after I started eating that way, I ended up moving from San Francisco across the country back to Massachusetts for a few months, where there was basically much more limited options in terms of organic fruit or just fruit in general. You have to drive like 20-30 minutes to find it. There wasn't a ton of variety. It was hard to get organic. And I just slipped back into my old eating ways. I thought for sure when I moved back to Los Angeles at the end of 2012 that I'd try 80-10-10 again, but 3 years later, here I am, and I have never gotten back into this way of eating. And I've wondered, what is it that's prevented me from eating this way? And I think there are a number of things, some that I was able to uncover through reading this book. It's definitely not a seasonal thing, because in LA it's warm most of the year and we have so much variety, but I can't imagine for somebody living elsewhere how much harder it is. 80-10-10 seems really easy in tropical regions of the world, although Doug Graham, the author, says that, you can't really use that as an excuse. We do have the internet, after all, so we can order things online. The cost side of things, I think, has felt a little prohibitive, but I haven't really calculated how much it would cost to eat 80-10-10. So that's something I need to explore a little bit more in depth, and that's why I want to do a part 2 of this video series. It just seems like eating so much organic raw fruit can get super pricey. So we'll see. I definitely want to try that part out, because I never want cost to get in the way of my health. I feel like I really enjoy cooked food, so that's part of the reason why I felt hesitant. I love brown rice. Like, one of my all-time favorite meals as a vegan is a brown rice bowl topped with great vegetables and some sort of a simple sauce. That makes me feel so happy and physically really good. It's great for my digestion. That is my go-to meal, and I think I'd feel sad if I didn't have that anymore, but I'm not quite sure about that. Then I think the big thing is that there's just part of me that feels skeptical about this. There's something about me that doesn't believe this, and I don't know what that is. Have any of you felt that way, overcome that, still feel that way? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. I feel like I'm not alone with this. In conversations or reading online, it just seems like it's like we're split. There are group of people who feel very skeptical about 80-10-10, and there are another group of people that are like all about 80-10-10 or low-fat raw vegan, and it's like one or the other, very black or white. I don't really feel like many people fall somewhere in the middle. So I just wonder, what is it that polarizes us so much? There's so much research in this book, and I'll touch upon a little bit of it in a moment. But there's something about me that just doesn't feel like I believe it, and I don't know why. It's interesting because through reading the Forks Over Knives books and the past videos of this series and the Starch Solution by McDougall, I really felt like I was so in alignment with them. Every part of the book I'd be like, yeah, that makes so much sense, or wow, I never thought of it that way before. Yeah, I can't wait to try this. And I've been eating, mostly following those 2 books' guidance for the past 2 or 3 weeks. I feel great. I'm excited about the food. It feels really easy to me, and I just haven't experienced that with 80-10-10. I'm not quite sure why. And lastly, I also am a very energetically sensitive person, and to me, the people, especially online, that talk about 80-10-10, I feel like there's a lot of negativity around it, and that's really turned me off. I felt like a lot of people are very judgmental of people that don't eat 80-10-10. I feel like it comes across as a very hyped up, trendy, popular thing. It feels like if you don't eat 80-10-10, you're not cool. Like the 80-10-10ers are the cool kids on YouTube and social media, and maybe that's my emotional issues or whatever, but I feel like there's this weird pressure to do something that I don't really want to do, and then my concern oh, maybe I should be eating that way, maybe that is healthier. I mean, Doug Graham is super convincing in this book and yet super strict, and that just scares me, whereas I feel like Forks Over Knives, for example, Crazy Sexy Diet is much more welcoming and positive and fluid and accepting, and I have to say, McDougall and the Starch Solution can also come across a little strict, but I don't know. There are moments in 80-10-10 where Doug Graham talks about being positive and, you know, working through emotional stuff. So I don't want to say that he's negative himself. It's more just feels like the community doesn't come across as that welcoming. It's like, I don't know. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but that's, I think, part of the reason I feel resistant to is I'm afraid that I'm going to become negative and judgmental and exclusive and, you know, I don't know. So let's dive into some of the actual parts from this book. And again, you can receive these in PDF form if you sign up for the link down below in the YouTube description field. And I'm going to go through some details about who Doug Graham is, what this book's all about, how to do this diet, and his opinions. So Doug graduated from chiropractic college. He's done a ton of research. He does not want you to take this as medical advice. He does not engage in the practice of medicine, and I think that's important, although it says doctor here. A lot of people have talked about how he's not really like a medical doctor, so it's very important to know where you're getting your information from. He does have his research notes at the end of the book, so you can always go double check things. I think that's super important when it comes to deciding who you're going to trust as advice. A huge goal of mine with this series is to look across all of these different opinions and then find where they meet up, what they have in common, what they don't, and try to find that balance. So we'll have more of a conclusion once I go through all these books I plan to read. Okay, so number one, he talks a lot about determining our true dietary nature, and he goes through all of these different ways of eating. He says, could we be carnivores? Well, our anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and psychology all indicate that we're not carnivores. And obviously that's something I really agree with, being a vegan. First of all, I should say quickly, how does he summarize what 80-10-10 is? It's a low-fat, low-protein program based on eating whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic, plant-based foods. It's all about improving your diet in a gradual, easy way. Okay. So let's start off with that so you have an understanding of this. Okay, then he asks, are we starch eaters? So I just covered the starch solution in the last video of this series, and he doesn't think that we are because in nature we would reject grass seeds as foods. We would have trouble digesting starchy roots and tubers and legumes. I personally really struggle with digesting legumes, but when I eat starchy vegetables and roots and grains, I feel fine. So that's part of this where it's like, well, I feel good about it. But as you'll see with this book, Doug Graham really believes that we should eat foods that we would naturally just have in nature without having to cook them. And I do think that he makes a great point here. I mean, would you go eat raw brown rice growing out of the ground or quinoa? Would you go like pull up a root vegetable and eat it without cleaning off the dirt? Would you eat legumes if they've never been soaked or cooked? I think he does have a point there. So he's really about eating things as they naturally grow from the ground. So he goes through all these different types of diets, you know, are we starch eaters, are we nut eaters, are we milk eaters, etc., herbivores. He concludes that we are frugivores. So in nature, humans would be frugivores only. So he goes through all the different details about that, and I'm going to skip over because I don't want to go too much in detail, but this will be all in those notes that I'm promising you. He shares some details about the acid-alkaline balance, which is a huge part of the Crazy Sexy diet that I covered a few weeks ago. And here are a few tips that keep us from being too acidic. So number one is if we consume cooked foods, heated fats, animal dried foods, grains, or more than a very small amount of nuts and seeds, that can make us acidic. Eating poorly combined foods, cooked or raw, smoking or taking any drugs or stimulants, including caffeine, drinking alcohol, carbonated drinks, coffee or tea, lack of exercise, insufficient rest and sleep, and sustained stress, anger, fear, and other negative emotions. Now, all of those bullet points are something that most of the people that I've studied so far in these books will agree upon. So that's something that I think if you avoid a lot of those things, except for maybe the cooked food side of it, pretty much everyone is going to agree that that can help you be healthier by cutting that out of your life. Especially Chris Carr goes into a lot of detail about this in the Crazy Sexy Diet. So that part I thought was good advice, but again, he brings up that cooked food side of things, and that's where my skepticism comes in. He has a chapter called Raw Food for Ultimate Health. One of the major differences between people and the other animals on planet Earth is that we cook our food and they do not. That's a good point. Raw foods make a lot of common sense, and the sciences completely support the raw food concept. Unfortunately, the doctors and scientists who study nutrition, for the most part, are cooked food eaters, and they see the world through a cooked food perspective. They cannot see beyond their custom view to envision another approach. And I think that's actually a really great point. I mean, again, as I said earlier, we have to look at who's providing the data that we're reading, that we're studying, and what their own biases are, what their backgrounds are. So for him, he's one of few people that I've read so far that takes this strictly raw food approach from a medical perspective and from a historical perspective. And then you read someone like McDougall, who has all this data about eating starches from way back to paleo times. So it's just hard to say, but again, where do those biases come in? And I really think it's important for us to continue to be skeptical. So there are benefits to that. To be sure, however, we pay with our health when we cook foods as a regular practice. You'll hear a few different lines about how he's saying that cooked foods are damaging our health, which is not something that a lot of people talk about. And again, that's where the skeptical side comes in. Heated foods are nutritionally inferior, which is one of the reasons people commonly overeat cooked foods. Their stomachs feel full, but their cells crave nutrients and remain nutritionally starved. So if you're trying to lose weight, if you're not feeling satisfied, are you nutritionally starved through the foods that you're eating? A lot of the doctors or the researchers, the experts, the specialists that I've studied so far say that that is true, but it's more dependent on the type of food, not just cooked food in general. So I think this is a much more extreme point of view, but that's what Doug Graham believes. He believes that cooked foods are health destroyers. So that's a very extreme perspective. These are his exact words. If we are honest with ourselves, there is simply no room for cooked food if we desire a vibrantly healthy existence. Okay. There's this section from one of his health mentors, T.C. Fry, and there are some more extreme points here coming from a different person. T.C. Fry says, if the food cannot be ingested in its natural state, that is, uncooked, unprocessed, and otherwise untampered with, it does not belong in the human diet. Again, I can see some perspectives on that, but so many of us eat cooked food, so does that mean that everybody that eats cooked food is unhealthy? And I think that's a huge part of this book, is they're kind of saying that they are, which is just mind-boggling. Cooking is the worst health practice that humans have ever adopted. It destroys not only the enzymes, but deranges and destroys almost all known food factors. Okay, so just to clarify what 80-10-10 is, it's shorthand for 80% carbohydrates, 10% protein, and 10% fat. There are major details in here about why exactly that is, and there's different chapters about carbohydrates, protein, and fat, busting myths, sharing all sorts of studies and research, and sharing how to eat them properly. I'm going to skip over that for now. One huge takeaway that I had the first time I read this book was a section on emotional eating. I think this is super key for figuring out what works best for you and for getting your body into balance. Our bodies have a finite amount of nerve energy at any given time. The digestion of food and the conduction of emotions each demand so much energy that they cannot be performed simultaneously. And this is really fascinating. He has a ton of examples about this, about our emotional states and how food is connected. Sometimes when we're so emotionally distraught, we don't want to eat at all. We have zero appetite. Other times when we're emotionally distraught, we eat a ton of food so we can stop feeling those emotions, so we can numb ourselves. That's going to come back around in another section upcoming. Okay, so if you feel like you want to try 80-10-10, obviously having this book definitely is important so that it can guide you along this practice. To summarize it though, he says, on most days you will eat juicy fruit for breakfast, sweeter fruit for lunch, and all the acid fruit you care for before a vegetable-based dinner. It really is that simple. He does have some really great meal plans and recipes in here, which I will get to in a moment. The formula, so 90 to 90% of your food should come from sweet and non-sweet fruits, 2 to 6% from tender leafy greens and celery, and 0 to 8% from everything else, other vegetables like cabbage, broccoli, plus fatty fruits, nuts, and seeds. And this is the part where I felt like it was hard for me because I started to get a little bit strict trying to get those exact percentages. So I need to get a little bit more in depth about this book again to see how strict he recommends you being. A lot of times he says that you will naturally fall into those percentages as you move along with this, but when you're first starting out, it can feel really challenging if you're not used to eating that way. Even the most perfect diet will never result in true health unless it is accompanied by a high-level fitness and all of the other essential elements of healthful living. So coming back around to that list I gave you earlier about exercising, getting enough sleep, being emotionally balanced, cutting out caffeinated and processed foods, and all of those different guidelines. So eating 80-10-10 is not the key to ideal health if everything else is unbalanced in your life. Okay, let's take a quick look at the meal plans. He has a meal plan, 7-day meal plan for each season, so summer, autumn, winter, and spring. So since we're in winter right now, I'll give you an idea of some of the meals that he would recommend. So one would be banana milk for lunch, banana milk for breakfast, persimmons for lunch, a smoothie for dinner, followed by an orange soup and an orange walnut salad. The next day could be a citrus salad, a banana celery smoothie, orange juice, cabbage tomato soup, and orange fennel slaw. For breakfast the following day, papaya, bananas with dates, pineapple orange drinks, pineapple lettuce tomato soup, and then a pineapple tahini salad. That sounds really good. On and on. So like I said, there are 7 days of this. So this really helps you for figuring out what foods will be in season for the winter. Then at the end of the book, he has a frequently asked questions section, so a few notes from that. What about eating an all-fruit diet? Doug Graham says he does not recommend an all-fruit diet. In his experience, we must eat vegetables, especially dark leafy greens, in order to experience optimum nutrition and ideal health. So remember, I shared with you those percentages, and I think that that's a big myth buster here, is it's not literally all fruit. It does include some other foods. So there is some variety there. He has a huge section about why people fail on the raw food diet, and most of that section is about emotional eating. And it's really fascinating to look into that. Our emotions are very deeply tied into what we eat, and I really would love to see if I need to uncover some more emotional things that might be holding me back. Obviously, as I mentioned before, I have emotional reactions to the 80-10-10 diet, whether it's the strictness or the negativity or judgment or whatever else, me feeling skeptical about it. Maybe I just need to uncover some layers from myself. But he ended the section saying, if you eat cooked foods, you stand the risk of becoming an emotional vegetable, someone who becomes ever more dependent on their cooked food fix. So again, I mean, you think you're eating so healthy, having a whole foods cooked plant-based diet, but he's saying that that's actually someone that's dependent on a fix. So again, that's a very extreme perspective in my opinion. Are cooked foods an addiction? He goes into some details about different vitamins, like vitamin B12, and one of the topics he brings up is how you can get vitamin B12 from some sea vegetables, but he does say he does not recommend the consumptions of sea life under any circumstances, because would we naturally be diving down into deep sea waters to pull out these sea vegetables? And if so, would we eat them in their raw, unwashed state? Probably not, because they're not very palatable or tasty. I mean, personally, like, I don't eat a ton of cooked or a ton of sea vegetables. Like I like nori, but nori's usually been processed, dried, salted, combined with other things. So sea vegetables on their own are not foods that I really love, but a lot of people associate them with eating a super healthy diet and getting all your minerals. So interesting point there. All right, last point that I want to make. Again, this book is packed with info. He talks about spices and condiments as well as salt. He basically says that salt is not good for us because if we're extracting sea salt from the sea, it's dehydrated and will cause us to feel dehydrated, and we are also dependent on that flavor enhancement. And the same similar perspective on spices and condiments. He says that if you can't make a meal of it, it is not likely people food. So can you make a meal out of raw spices or condiments? No, they have to be put on top of something else. So that is not people food if you go by that definition. No creatures in nature season their food, nor even generally combine more than one food in a meal. So if you want to eat completely naturally, you might be doing mono meals, which he talks about a bit, meaning that you would only eat one food for your meal, like watermelon or bananas or something like that, and that's how most other animals eat. Does that mean that we're, as humans, supposed to eat that way? That's up to debate, but it is something interesting to take into consideration. He says that different herbs and spices can also contain some toxic chemicals, so they might not be so healthy for us. So as you can see, there are some pretty radical perspectives shared in this book and a lot more in here that I haven't gone over yet. But there also are some really great things to consider, and if you are trying to eat as simply, as minimally, as naturally as possible and best for your health, I think this diet is really worth a try, and I feel, kind of split. Part of me continues to feel skeptical and like it might be a little too strict for me, and part of me feels like I want to give it another try. So I think I'm going to give this a try later on in this series, probably after the holidays, maybe in the springtime, and really dive into this, read it fully and try every single meal and just see how I feel again, calculate all the costs, and do some more work on my emotional feelings when it comes to food and different diets. I'm sure by that time, having read all of these different books, I'm going to have a lot of new perspectives, and I think this is a really great example of taking our time to examine different diets, looking at all different opinions, all different angles, and really taking it all into account. Giving ourselves the time to try some different things until we find exactly what works best for us, to consider other people's opinions, focusing in on our own emotions, our own bodies, our own lifestyles, and after we bring that all together, we can step back and have this great perspective on it and really give something a good try. So that's really my aim with this series, and I'm so glad that you're here with me as I go through this journey. I hope that you feel like you're part of this journey too, if you're looking for your own optimal health, your own optimal body appearance, and I think that there's so much that we can learn together as we are like this little support system, this accountability buddy. I would love to hear from you more in the comments. What do you think of 80-10-10? Have you read the book? Have you tried the diet? How do you feel about other people that you've seen online talking about it? And if you haven't read it, why not? Is there a specific reason? Have you just never heard of it? Or have you felt skeptical and turned off by it like I have too? I would love to hear all of those different perspectives in the comments. And again, please be nice. If you are going to be judgmental and harsh towards other people, you're not welcome here. I really want this to be a supportive community. If you see other people treating others poorly, bullying each other, please let me know, because those people will be banned from this channel, not for sake of freedom of speech, but simply because I want it to be supportive in that, and there's a place for those people elsewhere on YouTube. Okay, so I don't know what book I'm going to be reading next week. I'm going to go back to the votes that you turned in weeks ago, and I'm really just using those to order the books that I have. Let's see, in my head, I think I started with 19, so I've read four books so far, so we're down to 15 more books to go through this series, and I'm sure more will be added to that, so stay tuned. There'll be a new video here every Wednesday, and the notes will be sent out every Wednesday as well. Again, click the link down below to sign up for those. I'm so glad that you're here for me. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Until then, all the best to you with your own health journey. And tomorrow is Thanksgiving, So if you're watching this today before Thanksgiving, or if you're watching after Thanksgiving, what did you eat? How do you feel? And did you feel like you allowed yourself to overindulge? Did you feel like you were eating super healthy and felt very prepared? I want to hear all about your Thanksgiving experiences, the pros, the cons, all about it, and anything else that you did non-food related. All right, that's it for today. I'll see you next time.